All right. So this is Dan Royles interviewing Johnnie Ray Kornegay III for the Miami AIDS Memorials Project, our scholar interview series, which is supported by the Knowledge of AIDS project and working group. So thanks for talking with me today, Johnny. I want to just give you the opportunity to start by introducing yourself.
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much for inviting me to be here to talk about this really important work that I do think needs to be preserved in this way. So thank you. But my name is Johnnie Kornegay, or Johnnie Ray Kornegay III, sometimes known by J. Ray, but I am the Deputy Director for Strategy and Impact for CMP. I'm also a photographer and also a podcaster, but for the purposes of this conversation, the author of Sacred Ministry, the Black Gay DJ during the AIDS crisis, which CMP presented in 2016. So it's so crazy that it's almost a decade ago, but this work is still really important.
So can you just start by telling us more about the project, more about Sacred Ministry and how it got started?
Yeah. Um, my love for house music runs deep and constant. So, first and foremost, really my purest joy as a person is on the dance floor. In particular, dancing to house music. And so anytime I get the opportunity to talk about it and do anything, that is a thing that I want to do. And I started working with CNP in 2015, and I would always be talking to our executive director, Charles Stevens, about how important Black gay men were to the creation of this genre, and two, how there was this overlap with HIV movement activism that was really interesting, but wasn't kind of like talked about or really codified. There was some conversations, of course, happening in academia about it, but there wasn't a lot of conversation about it. And so Sacred Ministry really started as kind of a labor of love of me wanting to trace this lineage in a way that we could deliver it to community. So Sacred Ministry started as an idea that became a article called Black Gay Men of the AIDS Generation Invented Your Party, that became a syllabus. So it kind of goes from article and then into a syllabus where I was able to kind of take all of these resources that went into that article and turn it into a syllabus, and from syllabus to presentation, from presentation to public program. So it really was just kind of a way to build this thing out. And when I talk about this too, I want to highlight this. What I was excited most about with this program was we didn't develop it was just so that CNP can do it as a public program. This is downloadable. Community internationally can still download the syllabus and can still download the presentation. They can edit it, they can do it, they can present it in their own communities, because that was the thing. It's like, no, part of the way that this story needs to be told, and it's much more widely known now. But at the time, it was like, no, this has got to be something that people talk about community to community, especially if they love music. So that's kind of how it got started.
Um, so can you talk about like what do you like about this project? What about Sacred Ministry makes you proud?
Mm. I think it is the breadth of what we cover in the project that makes me really proud. So one of the things that was really important to me, right, is to start drawing lines. And this is literally my perspective. I am not a researcher, a formal trained researcher in this way, right? So I was really interested in, okay, what lines do I think are really important to draw in this conversation? And so I think the breadth of it and kind of the way those lines are drawn is really interesting about the project. I'm also really proud of the way it both lifts up these DJs. So the presentation from a DJ perspective focuses on Frankie Knuckles, who most people know, Larry Levan, who if you're a music person, most people know Larry. And if you like real deep in it, Ron Hardy is a person that people know. But I talk about Frankie and Ron and Larry and how they're all connected, right? Like these three black men from different areas are like all connected by events, you know what I'm saying? Orchestrated by like another person, right? So happy about that. And finally, I'm happy about I'm most proud of the way that this presentation also lifts up the importance of the club space as a place of activism, because it's so easy to dismiss in my experience at the time that this was being developed, it was so easy to dismiss kind of these club spaces as places of as kind of dismissible. But what this presentation does is it says, no, 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 no. But see, here's the thing. At the time when this was happening, at the time of the height of the HIV epidemic in the 80s, these were the spaces that people would go regularly. So the activism started in those spaces because they were safe, they were built on community, and it was these DJs that were kind of like the orchestrators of getting the word out about this thing that people didn't quite understand at the time. So I'm proud of how this lifts that up. I want to really quickly highlight a line, right? So that's behind me right here. Over there, I can't do the thing, but this is an album by the NYC Peach Boys. It's called "Life Is Something Special," which that title alone kind of tells you kind of about the vibe of the record. But what's really dope about it is the artwork on this album cover is by Keith Haring. These images are so famous. Keith Haring's kind of dancing images are closely associated with the HIV movement of the time, right? This album was done in like 81, 82. So Keith did the album cover for it in that early part. And this record was produced by Larry Levan, right? So there's this through line of people and work that was happening, and I felt like it was important to lift that up. But those things are the things kind of I'm most proud of about what Sacred Ministry does.
As you were talking, I was just thinking about, looking at all of these records that you have behind you and some of our conversation before
Mhm.
we started recording
Yeah,
about the DJ crate as an archive.
it is.
Yeah.
Yes. So, a couple of things. My brother Jonathan Blanchard said something really poignant. He said, this was on an episode of my podcast, Q Points. He said that record stores are like libraries, and these albums have energies in them. He's like, these records have like stuff in them because of just the way that they were created. So, all of these albums that are in here carry stories with them of how they've impacted people, but even from the artists themselves. So when we look at, so every album that I have even behind me has a story. So we have a Kai Alcé and Stefan Ringer. These are DJs killing it in Atlanta like right now, just legendary, right? So this is fairly new. Of course, I just mentioned NYC Peach Boys. This right here is because of your book. I know about this, right? So this is Respect Yourself, which was a song that was released in 1985. locally, regionally here in the Philadelphia area that was raising awareness about HIV to primarily to Black men, right? And so this was a hip hop song of the era that was released, but of course it was regional, not widely released. But this song has a piece of HIV movement history in it that has to be remembered, and the way that it gets remembered is through people like you, right, writing about it, Dan, and lifting the lifting it up for folks. And another way that this gets preserved is through ways like sacred ministry, about how we create how people like me who are just really interested in making sure that this stuff gets left behind, stuff that people can attend or read or present to the people in their lives. Sacred ministry can be done in an auditorium, or it can be done in your home. Or you could just read it because you like to read syllabuses and PowerPoints. Whatever works for you, do that. But I think that's really important. So you're right. These are archives.
Um, and I don't think we often think of them in that way for some of the reasons that you alluded to, because house music in particular is Black and gay and urban
Hmm.
and, part of popular music more generally, which is something are things that we don't take seriously,
Hmm.
um, intellectually often because they have those attributes, right? And that marks them as outside of
Yeah.
intellectual space or being worth intellectualizing about. So I really appreciate even, even more the work that you've done on sacred ministry. Um,
Can I add something
yeah, yeah, please.
to? I think um, to that point, um, I did sacred ministry at the Saving Ourselves Symposium. I had to remember where it was. It was either in 2017 or 2018. And I want to underscore your point with something additional. I think the other thing, Dan, is that it's painful history, right? So there was a person in the audience when I did the presentation at that conference that said, it's so interesting. I never thought about this way, and that part is paraphrased. But what he said after that was, I think we just put house music on the shelf and have been afraid to pull it back down. And the reason why he felt that way was because of the pain associated with the period. So the other reason, right, to have this conversation is because we're also calling the names of the people who would be in these spaces listening to this ministry from these DJs that would be there one week and gone the next. And it is part of my work, as one of the things I want to be able to leave behind is, even if we don't know those people's names, they know that we're talking about them and they're coming. So I just wanted to underscore that as well, is that it's important that we put it got put away, and it got put away for a very specific reason. But let me tell you what didn't happen. What didn't happen was, internationally, let me tell you something. So what happens is, we put it on the shelf as a community. The international community eats it up, and it becomes the number one genre of music in the world, right? But for us, it's sacred. And how do we now deal with the sacred? And so part of sacred ministry is like, no, pull this off the shelf. This is important history. We need to own it and reclaim it, because this music is being performed in stadiums in various versions of it, and none of us are part of that. And that's a problem.
Um, Do you have anything else you can share about how this work has been received? Like, how is it connected with the audience for it?
Mm. So it has resonated. So what I will say is, and people are always discovering this, and that's why I'm happy to have this conversation, because I do think it's important that people understand kind of how it came to be. But people are still discovering it, and it's my hope that people continue to discover it. I will say that it's once every couple of years where somebody will message me on Instagram because they read an article, right, where someone is lifting up the fact that black gay men inspired house music, or black gay men inspired EDM, or whatever, and then people will reach out and be like, hey, there's a thing that's kind of trending out there. I know that you talked about this in your sacred ministry, like, sort of thing. So um it makes a difference, right? And even just in preparation for this conversation, I hadn't really looked at I typed in black gay men and house music on like a Google just to kind of see what was going on. And I found a couple of things, but I also found sacred ministry. And what I loved about it is, yes, there was definitely scholarship that was happening before I did sacred ministry. And I want to shout out all of those folks that were doing that scholarship, right? But I also find that there's a lot more things that are happening since sacred ministry, right? So I do think the work that happened in development of this program with CNP was really important to kind of these early conversations, and I'm saying early, but that's really in air quotes, right? These conversations about house and particularly black gay men's involvement, right? Um, Definitely there were folks doing it, but I think there's always more people discovering it. And I'm excited that this gets to be part of that lineage.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, can you talk about some of the challenges with doing this, the sacred ministry, or doing kind of AIDS and memory work more generally?
Yeah. Um, One thing that I remember, I wish I had kept, and I may have, I wish I had kept this. But when I was doing the research and trying to draw these lines, I went to the CDC website, and one of the activities I just decided to do was like look at mortality rates as it related to HIV, because the CDC they broke it down by race. And you could go back like years, like you could just keep like looking at the years and it would tell you, you know what I'm saying, what these mortality rates were looking like. And so I started at like the first year that information became available, and I can't remember what year that was. And I went up to 1996, and I realized like, oh, that was the first year. And I'm pretty sure it was 96 because that feels really right in my bones, where the number of deaths related to HIV for black folks had surpassed white folks. It was like the first year ever. And that was kind of the trend from that point forward. And it put an exclamation point on why this memory work was really important and the work that they were doing. Because what this proved to me, I'm gonna just do it to me, and I wanted to share it with the world, is that our communities had been sounding the alarm to our communities since the very beginning. And there was actually I want to call this out. There was actually a event at the clubhouse in DC. The clubhouse in DC closed in like 1990. It was very early. And there was a paper about this which talked about one of the reasons it closed is because it was so heavily impacted by HIV, because their patrons, like, they were losing folks that were their customers, right? But one of the things that happened at the warehouse in the early years, and I have a newspaper clipping, in here for like from like 1983, but they held an AIDS forum. It was kind of the first of its kind AIDS forum. It was the Whitman Walker Clinic and the DC Coalition of Black Gays presents an AIDS forum for Black and Third World gays. They held that event in the club. And I'm looking at the flyer and I'm like, oh my God, they have these shirtless black men just kind of like hugging on each other. So we had always been doing it. And the part of the reason we're doing it, and they said that this advocacy event was really important because they wanted to center whether the impact of AIDS on the Black community was being reported accurately. So we were already asking the questions at the beginning and having forums to galvanize around it. So when I looked at that number, it literally was just like, oh my goodness, like we're talking, we're screaming, we're organizing, we're doing all of these things using our spaces, these clubs, right? Wherever we can have these conversations. To say no, we need this funding, we need this focus because this is really impacting us. So yes, I would say that was one thing really hard in this research was one, getting to looking at that number. I literally had post-it notes and I was just like grabbing post-its and I would write down a number, grabbing post-its, and I was like laying them out, if I can find these post-its, but that was important information. Because it was just like, damn, we've been talking about this since the beginning, and we still ended up here. So that was hard.
I know that CDC graph that you're talking about, it does show like so in such stark terms where the epidemic, the trajectory of the epidemic
Yeah.
as the burden of death
Yep.
shifts onto Black communities.
Mm-hmm.
It is really, really striking. And it speaks to all these questions of how we talk about the epidemic now, how we talk about its history, and how we remember it.
Yes.
Can,
Mm.
can you talk about how sacred ministry fits into the larger work of CNP?
Yes. I'd be happy to. So, just to let folks know on the record, so CNP is an organization, we're a narrative change organization. We stand in the tradition of your Bayard Rustins, your James Baldwins, your Essex Hempfields. These are, movement leaders, visionaries, folks that speak truth to power. That's like really in the bones of CNP. We believe that owning our own narratives is really important, that if we own those narratives, right, we can control our destinies, and we do our work in many different ways. So we have our original content, which we have on The Reckoning. We have our CNP Media Roundtable, our CNP Media Fund. We have a Narrative Leadership Institute where we train individuals on how to tell their stories, right? And another thing that is really important to CNP's work is our work around collective memory. And we do that because it's really important, right? Because if we understand our history, and figures that have made significant impacts or moments that have made significant impacts, we get to see fuller pictures of ourselves, right? We get to also connect with one another in a deeper way because we recognize the lineage, the shoulders that we stand on, right? So sacred ministry fits right into that. One, this is collective memory work. We need to say, no, this music that is being performed on stages internationally started because somebody went to the warehouse in 1978 and Frankie Knuckles wore them out and they didn't know what to do with themselves. Somebody went to the Paradise Garage in 1980 and Frankie Knuckles played a remix of a song that he made 2 hours before and it changed their minds, right? About what was possible. Somebody went to the music box and Ron Hardy was playing the music so loud and the people was like passing out on the floor and people didn't understand what was happening around them. And those men were playing from Black gay traditions. Whatever was in the sauce of what they learned over the years about how to make a crowd move and how to take you up and bring you down and inspire you, that was from a Black gay person. Like they were bringing themselves into that. We need to know that that's what you come from. So collective memory. Two, original content, right? So having this be a downloadable presentation, having this be a downloadable syllabus fits directly into that work. So those are two ways that it fits.
Yeah. I mean, on that issue of collective memory, what do you want people to know about the issue of AIDS in memory?
Mm.
That's in terms of individual memory or community memory or collective memory. What should people understand that maybe they don't already?
People must understand that the story of HIV movement history, the story of how organizations were built and got funding was built on the backs of Black and brown bodies. You could trace it back to the beginning of so many organizations, right? Where they were, what they were getting funding for and who they were getting funding to help, right? A lot of those folks was Black folks. And there were Black folks advocating for our work. You have your Mario Coopers who were advocating for funding in Black communities. You have your Fred Garnetts who were speaking up loud about the importance of people being educated about HIV. You had folks like Marlon Riggs who were making films about the impact of HIV and the intersection of queerness and race and all of these things. And Essex Hemphill writing poems, right, about this. So what I want people to know is that when you are talking about HIV and you're talking about HIV history, you are talking about Black history. So for me, I think it's important when I'm having this conversation and I'm talking within community, right, is to be like, no, HIV movement history is Black history. HIV movement history is American history, right? And we need to be able to say that, right? And be able to kind of draw these lines. And that was, one of the things that was within sacred ministry as well.
I mean, further along the issue of memory, how do you want to be remembered? And, in terms of the work that you've done, how do you want this work to be remembered?
Mm. I want to be remembered for my body of work. My poor brother, God bless him. I have said to him, I'm like, okay, if something happened to me, you're responsible for like all my photography archive. You're responsible for making sure that all of these things somehow lands somewhere where they can live and be preserved because it matters. And that's not being like whatever about like me or the importance of, but the work that I have done with CMP and outside of CMP is part of this larger collection and body of work that speaks to different aspects of our lives. So I want to be remembered for my body of work, and it's vast. Like, so I have some writing in there. I got some photography in there. I got presentations in there. You know what I mean? Interviews like this. It all, it's all part of the continuum. And in some way, shape, or form, it's connected to someone else's story. And so I want to be remembered for that work. And that's it. Like, and also for how people can use this. Sacred ministry is so crazy. I was looking at it today, getting ready for this conversation. and it still holds up. Like I'm like, because I was going back to the syllabus, and I'm like, oh, I'm probably gonna update some stuff in the syllabus. The syllabus actually still stands. I probably got to look at some of these links to see if they're still alive, right? But the origins, the meat of it still stands, and that's really important. So if I can in any way make timeless work that people can keep going back to and keep being fed from and keep being able to teach to the rest of the community, awesome. I want to keep doing that.
I am curious if there are ways, if you were to do sacred ministry from the ground up today, like if you were to take on that project now, how it might be different or how it might change, like understanding that it does hold up.
Yeah.
But are there things that you would change or maybe think differently about now?
Yes. So super secret. I'm gonna give you a Johnny art history thing. So the way I got into photography was really kind of by accident. So in oh in like 2012, I started to have this idea. I wanted to get a camera, which I still have, by the way. So that camera is in my bag. Like I still use my first camera. Like it's fine. That's my baby too. Like it's traveled the world with me. Um, I wanted to get a camera because I wanted to have the most interviews of DJs. Like literally, that was the goal. Like I wanted to have the biggest collection of interviews with DJs, particularly DJs that spun house music. Like I just wanted to like talk to everybody. That was the goal. Through that process, I started to take pictures of the DJs that I started talking to. Archives of those interviews exist in the world, by the way, because I did start it. Um, but the DJs will start to ask for the pictures. They'd be like, "Oh my god, but you took this picture while I was doing the thing. Can I get that picture? I want to use it for a flyer or whatever." And I'm like, "Whatever, sure." That turned into my photography career. So my photography career started with DJs, particularly house music DJs. So, what I would do differently with Sacred Ministry today is I would actually go back into that bag and incorporate um, interviews and images from Black gay DJs that spin house music. I would actually put that in. And I mean, it's not there now. I could still add it, right? That's not something that I can't do today. It would actually be a really good evolution of the project, to talk about the people who are those ministers today. That's an idea. I think that's coming. Um, but I would say that that would be one thing I would do differently is I would have an arts component to it.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to say? Anything that I didn't ask about? Anything that you want to hold up?
Wow. I would say I wanted to leave a note for folks who are listening to this. You do not need formal training, a degree, or anything like that to do your research and share your work with the world. If you feel like something is really important and it is not being shared, you need to make that thing. Okay. And I'm fortunate that I was working with an organization that our mission, that work aligned. It made sense. I have an executive director in Charles that was like, I believe in this. This is a conversation that people need to have. Let's have it in the way that you want to have it. You know what I mean? Do it. But I would say for folks that are listening to this, do your work. We have to leave it. You have to leave your thing. So do your work. And the last thing I would say is dance, dance, dance. Please, people. I cannot tell you for me the times that I have visited the dance floor and a DJ has changed the way I felt about the day, about how I was going to approach tomorrow. One time in what club was I in? I don't remember what club I was in. It was in Atlanta, and I stayed until the end. And the DJ, I can't remember who it was because I mean there's so many DJs in my head. They played as the closing song, "Hope You'll Feel Better in the Morning," and they sent that song out over those speakers. It's by Margaret Grace. I know you feel tired from all of your trials. I hope you feel better in the morning. And Margaret is singing over this thing, and the crowd is dancing, and we are all one. You can't leave the space worried about the stuff you came in with. It's not possible. That DJ, that person, whoever that was, my God, who was that? Whoever that was knew that I need to send these people out of here on something. They not just going to leave here tonight. I need to send them out on something. Margaret Grace, hope you feel better. This is going to be great. And he let that thing play for that whole 9 minutes and sent us home. Go dance, get in that space. Do not hug that wall. You need to get on that dance floor on the wood. You need to get on the wood on the dance floor, and you need to move them feet. And baby, the top and the bottom, they move different, right? So I need you to move them different, okay? And use that as a space of inspiration, but also a space of community.
I can't think of a better note to end on, Johnny. So thank you very much for this interview. Thank you for Sacred Ministry. Thank you for the work that you do at CMP. And thank you for sharing your time and your experience with us today. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this, y'all.